Good morning. I'm Tom Kelly, Automation Alley Executive Director and CEO, and welcome to the Industry 4.0 in Focus. This is our weekly virtual event series dedicated to the fourth industrial revolution. So as you know, getting old hat now, this is our 9th episode. Each week we're taking a deep dive into topics covered in Automation Alley's 2020 Technology and Industry Report. This week's topic is data protection and security in an era of Industry 4.0. So I'm pleased to be joined by Rick Bertonson. He's the Director of Technology and Security at Gallagher-Kaiser, and they're a Michigan-based automotive paint finishing supplier serving leading automotive manufacturers and suppliers around the world. So performing everything from design conception to the management of complex paint finishing systems, Gallagher-Kaiser has repeatedly been recognized by General Motors as a Supplier of the Year. We also have John Slack on the call today. John is a senior cloud consultant at Otava, a global provider of secure, compliant, hybrid, and multi-cloud solutions. John and Rick are here today to talk to us about Gallagher-Kaiser's case study that was featured in Automation Alley's 2020 Technology and Industry Report, where they joined forces for data protection services that would meet the Automotive Industry Action Group's new security requirements. So I need to say welcome, Rick and John. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks, Tom.
So before we get started, I always have a couple housekeeping things I like to share with the audience. So for our live stream viewers, please know you can ask questions. There's a little Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. And if you click on that, it'll bring up the Q&A window and you'll be able to ask a question. And we'll try to get to some of those questions at the end of our discussion. So Rick, let's start with you. Okay, so being a leading paint supplier, serving some of the biggest OEMs in the automotive industry, I'm sure Gallagher-Kaiser has dozens of large-scale projects running simultaneously all over the place. Talk to us about the importance of data security as it applies to your organization, especially in today's environment that we're living through.
Sure. So yeah, and yes, Tom, we do have several large-scale projects across North America currently. We have many of the same challenges that any business has, and some unique ones. So we have, we keep our financial data safe and separate. Our customer data is critical to us, and our personal identifiable information is we have to keep safe. So, and that's pretty much any company. We also have things like engineering submittal processes through the cloud services and virtual brick and mortar offices for 4-year periods that we have to treat entirely differently. And working as a partner with the OEMs, we have access to different classifications of their data, and it's important to our customers that they can trust us and not worry about the information that we have access to.
Yeah, right. So when you think about sort of the challenges of that responsibility, that you are now entrusted with data, which in many circles, data is now more important than almost any other IP that exists in the organization. Yep, but data wants to be free, right? It wants to live everywhere and go everywhere and do everything. So what are the main challenges today facing, and I'm going to ask this 2 parts, Rick. So the first part will be, what are the challenges facing larger suppliers like yourself? Suppliers that are partners to the OEs when it comes to data security. Next question I'll ask for the smalls, but let's start with the large suppliers. What do you have to face and how do you solve some of these issues?
Sure, Tom. I would say the number one issue today is clicking. And clicking is clicking on things, right? So whether it's an email, whether it's a website, clicking is what gets the ball rolling. Whether it's a link, malware, bogus password reset, emails, infected sites, it's all about my end users. So end user training is a must for all of our users. We've used a couple of different tools, and even if it's a matter of getting everybody on the same level set, end user training for phishing emails, just behavioral functionality it's completely critical. And that leads to, you know, a lot of the other security sets that we utilize after that. With our company, we get close to 1 million emails a month.
Yeah.
So I can't depend on a user to not click. They're going to click. Somebody's.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rick, that I keep, as I'm trying to get my head around our audience, you know, what I'm hearing you say is, you know, people think that security is about preventing Russian and Chinese hackers from infiltrating your system and causing all kinds of havoc. And what you're saying is we've identified the enemy, and the enemy is us. It's right. Our internal people. Is that right?
Yeah, it really, well, I won't call them enemies, but they'll be unwilling participants, let's call them that. But yeah, I mean, and that's big companies and small companies. You know, it's the end user and getting the end user at a level set of knowing how your company functions, knowing, you know, does your IT staff or does the company you're hiring to perform IT staff, should you be getting a password reset in an email? Mm-hmm. Should you be getting something that says, hey, our financial, you know, bank has changed. Send all your checks to this instead, you know. So right. You need processes. Everybody needs processes to put in place on how to check that, right? Yeah, so that's a huge thing. So and it starts there.
Yeah. So let me pull John in just for validation or perhaps a different take. So John, you know, you've worked with Rick very closely at Gallagher-Kaiser, but are you seeing the same thing if you extrapolate out across your entire base? What are you seeing in terms of the largest challenges facing suppliers?
Very similar. It's across industry.
Well, can't hear you, John. You might want to talk a little louder.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. Why don't you see if you can get your microphone turned up, and then I'll ask Rick a follow-up. Maybe you can work on your mic, and then I'll come back to you. So Rick, we talked about the larges, right?
Right.
Now let's turn to the small. So what do you think the small suppliers need to be thinking about? What's expected of them related to data protection and security?
Right. So anybody, I mean, any small business, you know, there's, you know, 5 to 10 things that any small business should be doing. Number one is going to be end user training. Get a level set. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you my 5 or so that, you know, I pretty much tell everybody. Firewalls. If you're a small business and you don't have a firewall, get one. Either hire somebody to put it in and configure it, or put it in yourself, but don't depend on your service provider, your cable provider to, you know, manage a firewall for you, because they're really not firewalls. Get a paid antivirus product. There's very inexpensive, good antivirus products out there. Don't go free and be dependent upon updating them yourself. Password protect your Wi-Fi. You know, make it complex passwords and
not the default password that came with the router, right?
Exactly. Use complex passwords and two-factor if you can, you know, and wherever you can, but don't use password 1, you know, with a capital P, so it's safe, right? Yeah, complex passwords and two-factor. Limit your access. If you're a small business and you're a growing business, you know, 10 years ago, we went through a growth. Right when I came on board, different story, but we won't get into that. We went and doubled our personnel every year for 5 years. So we became we were you know, 100 user company, and we doubled that every year for a 5-year period.
Wow.
So, and that's one of the reasons why I came on board here. It, so what you're doing today may change entirely when when you come back. So store and back up from a central location, that would be my last one.
That's great.
Is you want to do that. But, and like, so with John, me and John have talked for almost that entire time. And we've really, you hear the term peel the onion, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're doing the opposite now. Where, and we can get into that a little more when John, I'll turn it back over to John, but
Yeah.
What we did is we started small and then grew that out. But I had very specific requirements that I wanted to be able to grow into, and John helped with that quite a bit.
So let's turn over to John, and maybe we got the mic issue fixed. So, back to the question we'd asked, which is, are you seeing these same macro trends that Rick is seeing at Gallagher-Kaiser?
Yeah, it's across our entire customer base, Tom, and it's not focused on any given industry. It is clients that are 100,000 employees or 4 employees. He mentioned some critical things. Can you hear me? Okay.
Not really. No, you really have to shout.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, we got the question, but so you basically, the gist is you're seeing this across the board. Well, let's turn to this the problem that you guys solved that we talked about in our case study, centered around standards to be published by the Automotive Industry Action Group. Great organization. I love Scott Sharland and his team over there. Do great work. This group that is so influential and not well known outside of people in the know, like us that are on this table. Can you tell us about those standards and why they were put in place? Start with Rick.
Sure. So some of the standards that the big three have started with the AIAG was like NIST 800, 171, and that has to do with controlling unclassified information from the federal side. NIST 800, NIST 853, and that's security and privacy controls. And ISO 27002, which covers a lot of the best practices. So, and how they approached it was they tried to do it from the top down, meaning, large scale providers, tier 1 providers, all the way down to tier 3, 4 providers. And so it to a certain degree, it worked really well. But they didn't separate out, I would say the challenge they were faced with is they didn't separate out the size of the businesses and the requirements there. And I think that today that is being readdressed in some working groups.
That's interesting. So that's almost like breaking news. So NIST used to be one size fits all. And of course, if you were large and had resources, yeah, it's burdensome, but you form a plan, you form a team, you go out and you do it. If you're a tier 4 and you have 10 people in your organization and none of them are IT professionals, that has to be quite a burden. And you're saying NIST may, and AIG may work to address that now to try and figure out how to be secure, but do it in a way that can be done by smalls.
Yeah, I didn't mean to misspeak. I'm not going to say NIST is doing that, although
Okay.
NIST does have some standards for small businesses.
You didn't misspeak, I misheard. It's on me.
The number slips my mind right now, but I know there is a standard for small business for cybersecurity for NIST. There are working groups in the OEMs today that are focused on uptime for suppliers at all levels. And so, they don't want somebody making a widget to get ransomware attack that, affects the next layer up, and then shuts down a manufacturing plant.
Right.
So there are working groups that are addressing that today, from a all-inclusive perspective, and how to address, the basic from small businesses all the way up. They're trying to, they don't want us, nobody wants to scare anybody and say, hey, guess what? We've got these new standards today, new better standards, but it's going to be 10% of your budgets. So no, they're trying to avoid that, and there's some standardization and some common sense things that they want to implement.
Thanks. So let's flip back to John. Hopefully we got the mic issues resolved. So John, talk to us about the Otava Gallagher-Kaiser collaboration and how you came up with a solution that fit their needs, solved the problem, frame it out for us. What was actually done? We'll have a lot of listeners that are in large tier ones. We'll have listeners that are small. So it's tough to hit them both. But talk to us about what you did with Gallagher-Kaiser and Rick.
Well, we solved the same problem for a small company or a large company. Rick was talking earlier about malware, about somebody clicking and getting some ransomware potential. Well, the solution we put in place for Rick was we upgraded his backup and his disaster recovery capabilities to meet those standards. And so if something happens at site 1 where Rick is, everything is backed up and replicated 70 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's a problem with a click, Rick or his staff can fail over to site 2. Now, if you think about a ransomware, we can actually dial back, because everything's replicated, we can dial back right before the ransomware and start things over with minimal data loss.
And how, did I miss it? How often is that data being backed up?
It's constant.
Continuous.
It's continuous.
That's great. Is continuous a different price point than daily?
Absolutely.
Yes, is it?
Absolutely, yeah. Right.
It's a different price point, and then of course the storage requirements are different there too.
Right.
I'll just add on to that what John just said. So two things come to mind. Well, three things come to mind.
Yeah.
The world we're living in today and how we addressed going home from a COVID perspective. And I really didn't want to talk about COVID today because
it's okay. We won't be mad at you.
Really helped us out with our remote site, VP, having the capability. So we're a mobile company. I've been buying laptops for 98% of our users for the past 6-7 years. Our engineers all have our mobile engineering workstations, so they can work from home. They can work from anywhere. So we have that capability with John's backup. John said 70 miles away. The key thing there is that we're on a different power grid too. So if everybody remembers back in 2003, or some of us remember back in 2003, we had the big power outage.
I remember.
Looking at different, we wanted to make sure we were on a different power grid where we were servicing. And then the ransomware, which is a huge thing today. We've addressed ransomware with not only policies and procedures about where we're storing data, not locally on a box, so an individual box can bring somebody down, but where we're storing it, it's backed up completely, and it's it's encrypted, and we can get to that as needed. And then the continuous backup, we have 100 engineers working on a job, and I have to go to the last night's backup to restore all of their data for some unforeseen reason. That's 800 hours of engineering work that we've just lost. And,
right.
So
right.
we look at things like that. And now your cost, you start looking at what your costs are, and okay, we're doing a job now where we're working 7 days, 2 shifts a day. Um, and if we lost 800 hours of engineering work, that job's not gonna be pushed out any. So there's ramifications and there's cost incentives for everything we're looking at. And like I mentioned, is we're really growing this out.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Rick. So if we look out a year from now, 18 months from now, let's make the assumption COVID's behind us. What does the world look like that you are planning for? Is everybody back at the office? Is nobody back to the office? Is it some hybrid? And how do you think about your data and security needs? First, define what environment do you think is going to be prevalent? And then what you are doing to think about that. And then, John, I'm going to ask you the exact same question, okay?
It's a great question. And I don't know if we're the norm or we're the exception. We're actually, as a campus environment in Troy, Michigan, we're back to work. And we put up all of our safety guards and things like that. And we're 6 feet apart and stairwells are one way and, all that happiness.
Helps to be in a 3-story building, doesn't it?
Yeah, a 3-story building so you can walk up.
That's the new trend, right? You're calling it right now.
Right.
No more high rises.
But we also have a 25 to 35% of our employees work remotely at job sites for a 3 to 4 year period. So we're doing it a little differently. I don't know how many of our core campus people would work from home, although certainly they did for months at a time and could go back to that. But we're kind of the campus environment, and we like that campus environment. And even though we're sitting at our desks doing team meetings instead of in a conference room today.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's going to be a percentage that are going to be, working from home.
So John, let me ask you the same question. So Rick is a sliver of the market, and then there's a bell curve. Some will be like Rick, some will be maybe the opposite of Rick. What are you seeing out there as you look across all of your customers and you think about data and security? And first, just like Rick, what do you think the world will look like 18 months from now? And then how are you preparing or helping your customers prepare for that world?
Well, everything's remote, right? Our company is owned by Schurz Communication. They said, you're not coming back until January or February at the best. So we're all remote, and we're tied into our laptops, which are, the data and the applications are stored either on site at, in this case, Gallagher-Kaiser, or they're stored on site at one of our 10 data centers. And everybody's hooked into the applications that are on our infrastructure normally, or their infrastructure, and we just keep it secure.
Awesome. So last question, guys, and again we'll start with John on this, and then I'll give Rick the last word. So having been through this digital upgrade together, what advice do you have for companies out there that are looking to take the leap into Industry 4.0? It can be a scary pond, right? So John, we'll start with you. What should they be thinking about top of mind as they take this leap into digitization?
Well, the top 3 things, one of the top 3 things in every CIO's, to-do list is make sure they protect the data. And it's a great story with Gallagher-Kaiser here. And they want to do it inexpensively, right? And I think in this case, Rick basically paid for it with half of an employee. He's probably going to need to hire somebody. So they look at that as well. But in our case, we have this disaster recovery and backup all set up, and most businesses are focused on that.
Great. Rick, how about you?
Tom, I think planning is the key. Planning, you got to work with your suppliers. I worked with John. I had some visions in my mind of where we wanted to go. He brought in the right people. We talked about things. So planning with your suppliers, planning with your customers, determine what you need to go forward. And, and find the trusted vendors, do your due diligence and find the trusted vendors and business partners that you
I'm
want.
so glad you brought that up, Rick, because the auto industry has a long cultural legacy of playing, knockout, just bludgeon the other guy, and a distrustful environment. And here we're moving into a world where collaboration and trust is the competitive weapon. And the auto industry, I think, has to sort of, let bygones be bygones and say, look, we're in a new era. And I love that you brought up trust, because it can be a scarce commodity in our industry, and we really need to get past that. And so thank you for bringing that up. And I'm glad that as a tier one, that's a message that all the suppliers listening there. Here's Rick, Chief Security Officer, saying, hey, we got to build a relationship of trust with our suppliers. So that's really great. Rick, John, thank you so much for your time today. We had a great conversation. I actually learned a great deal, and Rick, you're a wise man. And John, next time we're getting that mic fixed, okay?
Right.
So
Sounds good, Tom.
this is a downside of work from home, right?
We appreciate it.
You betcha. So thanks for joining us, Rick, John. Really appreciate it. So last two housekeeping things. For our viewers today, please join us back here again next week as we continue our conversation on data regulation and protection with some of our academic industry 4.0 experts on Tuesday, September 15th. So we heard it from the business side. Now we're going to work with academics who are good at looking over the hill and around the bend of what are the things that are coming that we need to pay attention. And remember, if you belong to an Automation Alley member company, you can, and I hope you all do, you can download a free copy of our 2020 Technology and Industry Report featuring the case study with Rick and John at the member portal tab at automationalley.com. So thanks, Rick. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye, guys.